I'm going to present in two parts. I figured it's probably a good idea to give a little bit of background information about our program in the United States. It's a reporting program primarily, and a lot has been accomplished, I think. As you heard, we do have a very good relationship with the US FDA, and we pretty much interact with them almost on a daily basis. We operate a voluntary practitioner or provider reporting program in the United States. And it's very different from what I see the pharmacovigilance agencies and organizations around the world doing. They certainly serve a critical role, an important role in capturing data, which we don't really capture data. We capture the individual reports, the stories, the narrative information from the practitioner directly. So they're not filling out a form. They are communicating through our website or by telephone or even face-to-face or in other ways, and telling us about a medication error that they were involved with or that they know about, or that they're worried might happen. And it might be because of a labeling issue with a product. It might be because of a practice-related issue. And basically what we do is we share everything with the FDA. That's a requirement, and I'll show you we have a legal agreement with FDA. And then we also turn that information around, not every case, of course, but for its educational value in teaching people what is going on outside in other organizations besides their own, so that they might possibly become aware of a potential problem that they haven't experienced yet, and hopefully take steps to prevent harm from occurring in their own situation from medication errors. Our total focus is on medication errors. So I wanted to do this in two parts, a little bit of background on ISMP, and then also part two, which will be most of the presentation, which will be about the information that we've collected during COVID from March until the present. In fact, next week, we will have an article on medication errors involving remdesivir, which we have quite a bit, and our Food and Drug Administration also has quite a number of reports that all of us can learn from. So I'm going to proceed now. So the first part will be a backgrounder about ISMP and our role and the role of FDA and how we interact with the field. And first of all, I should tell you, we are not a private company. We are a public charity. So when it was formed a little over 25 years ago, in 1994, we formed as a nonprofit organization. So we are governed by a board of trustees. And actually, very recently, we affiliated with another large nonprofit, ECRI, or as we call them, ECRI. It used to be called ECRI Institute, and before that, it was Emergency Care Research Institute. And they focus largely on everything outside of medication errors. Their focus was not on medication errors. So it was a really good affiliation for us. A piece of the puzzle, two pieces of the puzzle came together. So a lot of their focus is on medical devices, for example, or procedures. And like I say, they're a very large organization, and they are multinational. They have locations in Malaysia, in London, and in Dubai. And we were very happy to see the new relationship between UAE and Israel as a good thing, we think. So anyway, I'm going to proceed now. So we are a 501c3 in the United States. That's a government known as the Internal Revenue Service classification for a nonprofit charitable organization. Our whole mission is to advance patient safety, and we do have a presence worldwide, not just in the United States, but most of our focus is here. We did start an organization with colleagues from Canada and England called the International Medication Safety Network. And over the past couple of years, we have been interacting a little bit with ISOP, globally, but also with the medication error prevention effort in Morocco at Rabat, at the PV Center there, and also with Uppsala, the Uppsala Monitoring Center. So we have some planned activities up ahead. I mentioned we're affiliated with ECRI, and in the United States, we have the good fortune of having legal status with our government. So we are one of the federally certified patient safety organizations. So what this means is, if the provider who reports to us is concerned about the potential, for example, for a lawsuit, down the road, and they want to protect their information that they send to us legally, they can send it to us as a patient safety organization, of which we are federally certified by the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality. And we can protect that or shield that information from the plaintiff's attorney. So that's a good status to have. And about 8% of the reports that we get, the reporter asks for that status. So it's a little bit different than most of the other reporting agencies. We're one of many in the United States, but we're the only ones that are focused on medication errors and nothing else, and also a nonprofit. And our information is available to everyone. We have newsletters that I'll show you in a couple of minutes. So it's totally on preventing medication errors. Another feature of our program is that I am a pharmacist. I've been a pharmacist for many years, but our organization has as many nurses as we have pharmacists. And we have a physician who is our medical director, who is an anesthesiologist and a pediatrician at Children's Hospital in Philadelphia. And Ron Littman. He has been to Israel and he did presentations on our behalf. So it's also the approach that we take. When we interact with people, we are not presenting the position of a physician or the position of a pharmacist or a nurse. We try to present the position as an interdisciplinary group that is making the recommendations. And we think that has been very important to our success, the successes that we have had. We started out as a journal column in the 1970s, and it's published monthly, and multiple journals. All of our staff has, our professional staff, not all, but most of them have responsibilities to present in different journal columns, which are available through subscriptions from different publishers. Some of them are free, or organization like American Pharmacists Association. Nursing 2020 is one of the journals right now. We hear directly and interact with the providers. It's not like a nurse has to fill out an incident report and send it to the risk manager, who sends it to the FDA or a database. They talk to us directly. And the reason for them reporting is altruism. They want to benefit others with their information. So they are very free with their interactions with us. They love to talk to us. They will share photographs, screenshots from electronic health records, if that has been part of the reason for an error. They will talk to us on the phone to explain procedures that we may not be familiar with. That happens obviously sometimes. And this way, we are able to collect a lot of really important information and get detailed information so we can write this up and provide it in a publication. We have our own newsletter. We have 5 of them, which I'll show you in just a minute. One of them being our Acute Care, or our hospital. It's kind of our flagship or a major publication. And the really important thing too is that it does impact the work of the Food and Drug Administration, because they have made many scores and scores of changes with guidance statements, with working with manufacturers to change regulated product packaging, labeling, nomenclature. The same is true with the United States Pharmacopoeia, which develops the standards that FDA must follow, unless there's an extremely unusual exception. And USP has an entire chapter in the United States Pharmacopoeia publication, Chapter 7, which is almost totally from the medication error reporting program. Constantly, new things are learned and incorporated. More recently, we affected expiration dating and having a standard way to communicate expiration dates, but also recently we removed ratio expressions from USP drugs like epinephrine. You won't see 1 to 1,000 or 1 to 10,000. Isoproterenol, neostigmine, none of that exists. It's all metric now. Because we had so many errors and people really didn't understand what that ratio meant. So I think it's a much better situation now with 1 milligram per milliliter rather than 1 milliliter 1 to 1,000, and people get that confused with 1 to 10,000. So we had many errors that were very serious and sometimes even fatal. We do affect public policy. We have 3 major programs: medication error reporting, vaccination error reporting, and we have a consumer reporting program as well. So we have a nurse that we employ for the consumer reporting, and we get a significant number of reports. And we have learned from the consumers about things that go wrong that involve them, sometimes with pharmacy dispensing. We often cannot get the details that we need, though, because the consumer doesn't know what happened behind the pharmacy counter that may have led to a medication error. However, we still learn from them. Rarely we are able to get in touch. They put us in touch with their pharmacist or their doctor, but that's generally not the case. But we still learn about significant problems. For example, right now, we have had a long-standing problem with a contact lens cleaning agent, which contains hydrogen peroxide. And we have been working to get the labeling changed and improve the product packaging, because all too often we have teenagers, adults that use the hydrogen peroxide directly with their contact lens and then place the contact back in their eye, and they get a severe burning and even sometimes damage to their cornea. They try to get the lens out and they scratch the cornea with their finger. We've had a couple of patients that have been blinded. So we learn about that from the consumer, and many other things as well, that we have a consumer newsletter. ISMP serves as an early warning system. One of the benefits, and of course, FDA is a PV center, as well as being the drug approval organization in the United States for safety and effectiveness. But we are able to react much quicker than FDA. FDA generally has to work with the manufacturers. There may be proprietary information involved, so they can't, publicly disclose a lot of the behind the scenes communications that are happening, not even to us, obviously, even though we have an agreement with them. But we can work with the manufacturer and we can interact with FDA to present our position and our recommendations. And then, of course, we can communicate the information very quickly. And I'll give you an example of that. Just within the past week, we learned of 2 incidents involving the agent tranexamic acid, which is for bleeding, where it was accidentally given instead of bupivacaine, the local anesthetic, for regional anesthesia. When this is given in a neuraxial space, it can be fatal. We had such a fatality reported a week ago. And so within, probably later today, we will develop a national alert called a National Alert Network, and we will be sending that using the auspices of the United States Pharmacopoeia, American Society of Health System Pharmacists. We use an advisory board of providers and practitioners that review. Within the next 48 hours, we would probably have, at least by next Monday, which is a holiday here, possibly Tuesday, we'll have something that's released, which is very quick to be able to get something out. We've done that many times, and there's an archive of these national alerts on the USP.org website. Look for NAN alert, National Alert Network. This is in addition to the newsletters that we publish on a regular basis. So we serve as an early warning system. Lots of learning and dissemination of information, and then also a lot of change. I know that this sounds almost unbelievable, but just one change alone, obviously, can affect hundreds, if not thousands, of product labeling, products where the labeling has been changed. So I'll give you an example. In the United States, for many years, our injectable medication concentrations on the injection vial, the package, the concentration was expressed on a per milliliter basis. And we would occasionally have overdoses where a nurse would read the label and not notice the volume, and it might be 10 ml. So it might say 5,000 unit per ml, and in the upper right-hand corner of the vial label, it says 10 ml. So there's 50,000 units in the vial, but the nurse thinks it only has 5,000 and gives the entire vial for a 5,000 unit dose. So we worked with USP after having this happen many times with many different drugs. And about 7 or 8 years ago, we made the change. So in the United States, and we're trying to work now with ICH to get this worldwide, because the same errors happen elsewhere, by the way. In the United States, we now require manufacturers to express the concentration as the amount per volume. So for the 5,000 unit per ml and a 10 ml vial, it would be 50,000 per 10 ml, and then in parentheses immediately below, 5,000 unit per milliliter. And that has prevented a lot of errors since that change was made, but it affected all injectable products. So literally thousands of vial labels. Not only that, but if you look at products taken off the market, name changes, all this going through FDA as regulated product, medication errors, it's well into the upper hundreds of product changes on an individual basis that have occurred in the 25 years this program has been operating. So this style of reporting, and I think it's one of the most important things I hope to convey to ISOP and to the organizations that are responsible for our reporting, is you need a PV center and you need an independent provider style organization that collects this information and works with the PV center to be able to collect this information, or else the PV center has to find a way to establish such a reporting program itself. It has to go beyond data. Data is important. We don't have a lot of data. We only get about less than 2,000 reports a year. Your PV center might get a lot more than that, but we get a lot of detail and we're able to talk to the individual directly. We never identify them. Not once in all the years we've been operating have we identified an individual or a location. But we get the information, we talk to them on the phone, they show us the pictures, et cetera, et cetera. And that's how we've been able to accomplish what we've been able to accomplish. And I fully believe that this style of reporting is critical to reducing medication errors. So I wanted to make that point this morning. Then also standards and guidelines, like I said, with the United States Pharmacopoeia. So many of the standards that affect drug safety from USP standpoint go through the medication error reporting program and the information that they learn. Our change in the expiration date actually is reference to the ISMP medication errors reporting program as the organization that provided all the information that was necessary to standardize in the United States, how we express on all prescription drugs, all OTC drugs, and even supplements that are USP, how they will be expressed. It requires a 4-digit year, for example. And I won't go into all the change right now. We do have a memorandum of understanding with our FDA so that we can communicate behind the scenes. It's not proprietary information, but we may be working on a project together that isn't made public. It's not like it would favor any individual or company. It's always very positive. For example, we once developed a list of abbreviations that shouldn't be used. Or they may be preparing an article for publication in our newsletter. That has happened many times, and we highlight the newsletter from them, the newsletter article. They have a division, by the way, called the Division of Medication Error Prevention and Analysis, or DMEPA, and we share a fellowship program. FDA supplies a fellow to work with ISMP for 6 months. They work with us full time, and then they go down to FDA and work with FDA, and after 1 year, they graduate the program. This is just what our reporting program website looks like. It has a location, and if you click that, you see what you see there on the bottom, reported error, and we can report a vaccine error, a consumer error, or an error to our patient safety organization. So these are what we discuss: nomenclature, labeling, and packaging. I mentioned they publish in our newsletter. We call it FDA Advise Error, and we do name the authors from FDA. You'll see one coming up soon. ISMP and FDA share the fellowship program I mentioned, and many of the guidance statements on the FDA website started with the error reporting program. So if you look at the nomenclature, that's partly, for example, they put out information to our industry, you know, on how to safely develop a brand name or a trademark. And there are guidances that FDA has developed, including even a good idea is to have the name tested by providers in the field, you know, to make sure it doesn't look like another name or sound like another name or so on. I mentioned we share the fellowship and the guidance statements. And then very quickly, our program works by receiving the report. Our professional staff reviews it, and we interact with one another and make recommendations to one another on how we might proceed. If further investigation is needed for sharing the lessons learned, we do that with practitioners that reported it. With FDA, we often will interact with the pharmaceutical manufacturer. They know us pretty well, certainly the larger companies, and they will help us. Also, the device manufacturers, IV devices, for example, smart pump, infusion pump manufacturers. We'll be talking about that with in regards to COVID. And then further investigation is conducted. And then we come up with what we believe are reasonable, measurable, and attainable recommendations. We share that with the field and draft, and we come up with eventually a hazard, our story, and our recommendations, and we share it via our newsletters and our journal columns. I know many of the hospitals in Israel, for example, receive the ISMP newsletter already. We also share it with manufacturers, other product vendors and regulatory agencies, and also with the International Medication Safety Network. We have begun to establish a reporting site where we hope to be able to communicate international medication errors. And just a little bit more information about how this is done. I do, as I said a little bit earlier, find that this is a key to success globally, is that narrative information that we're able to get, the story. It's storytelling. It really is. It's anecdotal reports. It's nothing more than that. And it is so important. And that is what people prefer to read more than anything. What happened to the patient? Our nurses, we have to hit the nurses. They're the ones that are in the front lines taking care of the patients. They need to be able to understand. We tell them the story. We have a nurse advisor publication. I'll show you in a minute. Always confidential, never identified an individual or an organization since we started. And I mentioned how we interact with regulators. Our information comes from consumers, practitioners. Our reporting program, we do get MedWatch. Another part of the agreement with our FDA is that they can send us information about the ER reporting, the ER reports that they receive. So I've just requested within the last few days ER reports on acid citrate dextrose, which is used not internally, but along with equipment for apheresis, for example, or for continuous renal replacement therapy. It's used with the equipment, not given directly to patients, but we've had some that was actually given directly to patients with adverse effects. look-alike bags. We wanted to know more, and I request from FDA, and they send me the reports redacted. That's a special thing that we have based on the memorandum of understanding that we have. And then any other sources where we learn about medication errors, even a newspaper clip is enough for us to try to get in touch with the organization or even the journalist to find out more information and be able to share the story. So we've been able to do that. We do have ISMP in Canada, Spain, Brazil, and the International Medication Safety Network. And our output is to practitioners, organizations, consumers, regulatory, and industry. These are the newsletters. I just have a couple more slides. We have one for long-term care. We have one, the nurse advisor. We have over 1 million nurses that get this. This is free. We have, you can sign up for it on our website. This is our Acute Care. That's a subscription basis. But we believe we have every hospital in the United States. We have the individual hospitals, only about 1,000, but many of them have group purchasing organizations that contract with us to provide it to their clients. So that's how they subscribe. We have one for consumers, Safe Medicine, and another one for community pharmacy. And this is an example of our national alert network where we put out major warnings. It's not just product related, a lot of it is practice related. So we have come up with what we call targeted medication safety best practices. It's a spotlight program for how to handle certain drugs. I noticed my colleague Andrew Seeger is on this call. I saw his name on the screen, and Andrew and ISMP have worked for a long time to bring more information about intravenous vincristine that occasionally is given into the neuraxial space, notably intraspinally, intrathecally, which is almost always fatal. There have been a couple of cases where patients have survived but been paralyzed. Andrew has collected over 140 cases, and he has shared them with us. We have our own cases that we've occasionally received. And in the United States, just this past summer, or this summer, the Food and Drug Administration has removed Syringe Administration from product inserts, the labeling of the product. It's only to be diluted in a mini bag, a flexible container. No longer in a syringe, because the syringe can be used to inject it intrathecally. The mini bag, a larger container, would never be used. In fact, it's something I'm thinking about for the tranexamic acid that was mixed up with bupivacaine. When we put tranexamic acid in a mini bag, it's doubtful that would be syringed for regional anesthesia. So it might be one of the fixes we recommend. So we also did one on methotrexate. There's a whole list of recommendations for each of these that you see here. This is for 2021. We've been doing this now since 2014. Every other year we come up with new ones. And we have done baseline studies, surveys of organizations to see how well they're doing over time in implementing these. These are all practice issues. These are not regulated product issues. And it has been a very successful program. When we started with vincristine, and I'm not claiming that we're the only ones that have promoted this, the professional organizations in oncology have as well, like American Society for Clinical Oncology, the Oncology Nurses Society, as well as ISMP. We started, it was 40% in 2014. Now we're up to about 85–90% of hospitals that only use mini bag.
Perhaps I just want to add that what I have really used as much as possible was a self-assessment, which was used in the hospital Mayana Yoshua in Israel to really assess the practice and change the way people are behaving, so changing behaving, setting up a kappa, and it has changed tremendously the way the hospital was looking at drug safety. So I don't know if you have more questions or if we can go to the second part of your presentation.
We can. And by the way, we have a perioperative self-assessment that will be published in about a month. We've been working on that for several months. It's funded by FDA. So that was actually the last slide. I just wanted to show the websites. Well, we'll now go to part 2, which is the medication safety during COVID. And